Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is November 19th, 2022, Saturday, November 19th, 2022. And our first story is out of Eerie News, and it's titled The Lake of Death Still is Mysterious as When It Was Discovered in 1942. A search for rare plants 18,000 feet up the Himalaya Mountains yielded a much rarer and macabre than what was being first sought. In the summer of 1942, a forest ranger found the lake, which measures 200 feet long and 150 feet wide. Skeletal remains with tattered clothes littered the shore. The only other persons known to have visited the lake was Lieutenant Hamilton, a British Army officer who arrived in 1942 soon after the forest officer had been there. He brought back with him pieces of clothing and wooden utensils. His ulterior purpose was to verify if the bones belonged to Japanese soldiers that died as they crossed the mountains during World War II. This place is above the highest inhabitable point in the Himalayas. It is remote, and the closest village is almost 20 miles away. In 1955, Indian officials returned and they were told about the bodies by the villagers. One of them said, "We were climbing up a steep slope near Trisul Massif when we saw the lake and all around it several bodies lying in haphazard fashion. As soon as we saw them, the villagers with me fled, shouting 'Ghost!' But I was not afraid and stayed there to examine the bodies." He described where some of them were covered with a light layer of sand and others were buried with only their hair showing. There was no scent of death, but the bodies were bloated. Around the remains were wooden utensils of a type used by Indians who trade into Tibet for churning tea and butter. An Indian state official was told by frightened villagers that the bodies, all 200 of them, were well preserved despite being there for hundreds of years. They said the remains belonged to a group accompanying a Maharaja of Gwalior. He was Raja Jasdaval, and his wife was the Princess Rani Balampa. In one version, they were a hunting party. In another, they were pilgrims who were visiting the temple of the goddess Nanda Devi. Local folklore said that due to their inappropriate behavior, they were struck down by the wrath of the goddess. According to the book Deep in the Indian Himalaya, quote, "The king of Kanuj, a city on the Indian plains, decided to make a pilgrimage in Nanda Devi's honor. He brought a huge entourage with him, including his pregnant wife, servants, dancers, and musicians. When they reached Rupkund, they should have dropped the idol off Nandi Devi to continue with the journey to Mount Kailash on her own. The king, however, wanted to go further and insisted everyone continue traveling with him, including his wife, his newborn, born during the trip, the musicians, and the dancers. Newborns and their mothers are considered polluted until the appropriate time period has passed and puja has been completed, and musicians and dancers were strictly forbidden to go beyond Rupkund. So as the troop trekked past the lake, Nanda Devi became angry at the king's lack of respect for propriety, creating a horrendous storm, killing everyone at Rupkund in its wake. The goddess' wrath came in the form of a snowstorm or an avalanche. The remains were scattered around Lake Rupkund before the Trisul Peak in Garhwal, close to the Tibetan border. The bones could be seen through the water during the 1 month when the ice over the lake melts. They were all very fresh, with hair and flesh still preserved by the cold air. Besides the human bones are those belonging to horses, as well as iron spearheads, rings, and leather slippers. In 2004, 38 of the remains with flesh attached were brought to the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology by National Geographic magazine. They included men, women, and children. There were 23 males and 15 females. Some skeletons had matching DNA. They were tall and had an extra bone in their skulls. By 2019, it was determined that the sample individuals were clustered around 3 distinct groups. 23 of them fall within range of present-day South Asians. 14 have ancestry belonging to the Eastern Mediterranean. There was only one person with Southeast Asian-related ancestry. Radiocarbon dating indicated the remains were not deposited at the same time. The ones with South Asian ancestry date to 800 AD. However, they all died at the same time. All the others date to 1800 AD. A different dietary profile is found for the two groups. The two groups were generally healthy, but there were three persons with unhealed compression fractures. A theory that had been floated is that they died during a violent hailstorm, which is known to occur in the area and which is a source for the Nanda Devi story. There is one group of robust and tall individuals outside the range of almost all South Asians, which are referred to as the territories of the present-day countries of India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. The other group is made up of smaller and thinner individuals. In some cases, the male and females had similar proportions, making it difficult to believe they were part of a military expedition. None of them were closer than 3 degrees, which dispels the belief they belonged to the same family. The sex of the individuals were accomplished by computing the ratio of the numbers of sequences that aligned to the X chromosomes versus the Y chromosome. There was one person between the age of 20 to 35, 10 people were between the age of 35 to 49, and 6 were in the 50-plus age group. Approximate age could not be determined for 6 of them. Examination of 20 skulls found they suffered from a short-term lack of iron and vitamins C and D, which is consistent with a prolonged trek towards the Rokund, which fresh food and sunlight are in short supply. One of the skulls had a fracture that was sustained before death, and it was completely healed. Both groups ate plants and animals. The later group correspond more closely with inhabitants of present-day Crete. None of the groups had any genetic ties to groups from the Himalayan region. Later research finds that Rupkund Lake is not on any major trade route, but is a present-day pilgrimage route. The Nanda Devi Rajat pilgrimage occurs every 12 years. However, descriptions of the ritual do not appear until the late 19th century, but there are inscriptions in nearby temples dating to between the 8th and 10th century. The later group appeared to be descended from an Indo-Greek population established after the time of Alexander the Great. The group is men and women who are not related and were born in the Eastern Mediterranean during the time it was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Hindu practices were not common in this area of the world, which would not agree with the theory they were pilgrims. It was earlier believed by the local populace that the skulls were of General Zorawar Singh of Kashmir and his men, who had gotten lost and died in the middle of the Himalayan region after they got caught in bad weather while returning from the Battle of Tibet in 1841. Other theories are that they were the victims of an epidemic or a suicide ritual performed near the lake. The estimate of how many dead are strewn around the lake range from 200 to as much as 800. Since no count has ever been done and many of them have been removed over the years, the exact number will probably never be determined. Despite the genetic analysis of the remains, a true cause of death is yet to be determined. Many of the bodies have not been examined. What has been established is that they did not die due to an epidemic, neither was their deaths attributable to battle. There were no weapons found nearby. An anthropologist at the University of Pennsylvania offered an explanation that the area is a graveyard, which could account how they all ended up in the lake, since it's unlikely all the individuals would expire at the lake's edge. However, since they are not connected genetically to any local groups, it does not explain why this could be used as a cemetery. The belief that there was evidence that many had died due to a skull fracture is found not to be accurate after the examination of the skulls. The reason for their deaths, or how they all came to be at this place, is still a mystery. In 2009, the Chamoli District Administration had decided to develop the area as an ecotourism destination, which, by the way, accounts why they say many of the bones have been removed. A lot of people that go there on a tourist trek end up taking some of the bones, which, by the way, it's from what I understand, it's a very difficult 4 or 5 day trek to get there. And most of the year it's frozen. There's only a certain time of year, but even so, they've lost count of people have walked away with remnants. So that's why it'll be very difficult. But then again, you ask yourself, how did two group of people 1,000 years apart all end up being basically put in the water there of that lake? Very strange, very mysterious. I hope they get an answer. Now, this is a story out of Ancient Origins, and it's titled, "Was this Trepanned skull found in Turkey the work of magicians or medics?" Researchers in Turkey have unearthed yet another trepanned skull. But was this brutal operation the work of magicians or medics? While the academic disciplines of neurology and neurosurgery didn't begin until the 16th century, trepanation was practiced in many parts of the ancient world and is widely acknowledged as the oldest known neurosurgical procedure. Successful trepanation was when a surgeon cut or sawed a section of bone from the skull of a living individual without damaging underlying soft tissue. Now, archaeologists in Turkey have discovered a 3,200-year-old skull with a triangular section sawed out. The big question is, who undertook this complex and seriously risky prehistorical procedure? Ancient Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, was one of the first regions in the world developed by early Neolithic agriculturists after the last ice age. In 1958, the first publication on trepanation in ancient Anatolia was released, and subsequent anthropological studies on Anatolian skeletal remains show that trepanation was practiced from Neolithic times up to the Ottoman Empire. According to a 2020 Nova Scriptorium article, the skulls of 40 individuals from 23 different Anatolian settlements are identified to have been subjected to trepanation. In 2009, a team of archaeologists announced the discovery of the earliest trepanation of a living human, had been unearthed at the Neolithic Asikli Hoyuk archaeological site in Turkey. This particular cranial operation was carried out during the Ceramic Neolithic period, around 8,000 years BC. Now, showing the progression of the craft over thousands of years, another trepanned skull has been unearthed during excavations at an early Iron Age necropolis in the Isimli hamlet of Uzuntekni village in the Katak district of Van. This recent Trepanned showing here, for those of you not watching the video, which is a skull with the back with a triangular hole there. This recent trepanned skull in Turkey was discovered during rescue excavations at the early Iron Age necropolis, which began in 2016. The find was recently posted on Twitter, because they've discovered evidence of trepanation in different continents. According to the authors of a 2011 study, trepanation in the ancient world aimed to treat complaints ranging from physical injuries to mental health problems and epilepsy. The researchers listed three primary reasons for trepanation in the Neolithic period. The first was magical or religious attempts to relieve negative spirits from the body. A second reason was initiation rites. Then the least common reason was as therapy to treat trauma, tumors, convulsions, epilepsy, migraine, loss of consciousness, and behavioral changes. Another unanswered question about the 3,200-year-old trepanned skull discovered in Turkey's Van province is whether or not the person survived their surgery. While the removed section looks quite clean today, the act of drilling, cutting, sawing, and scraping a hole in the skull meant not every patient survived. However, evidence from Peru suggests many did, including more than 100 subjects of the Inca Empire. In 2018, a team of U.S. archaeologists and scientists systematically studied trepanation success rate across different cultures and time periods. Hundreds of skulls from around Peru were analyzed that dated to between 400 BC to the mid-1500s AD. These researchers stated that if the bone around the surgical hole showed no signs of healing, then the patient had died either during or shortly after the surgery. However, when smooth bone was identified around the opening, this indicated that the patient had survived for many years after the procedure. In the Peruvian sample, increasing rates of trepanation survival seemed to show over 1,000 years of refining their methods, said Corey Ragsdale, a bioarchaeologist from Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. Wow, that's big holes. We'll have to wait to find out whether the surgical subject of this trepanned skull in Turkey survived the operation or not, but we will probably never know whether this trepanation was an act of magic or medicine. Interesting. Well, yeah, I could see where they decided that they were going to do it just to, what's the worst that can happen if somebody was especially in bad shape? Okay, we're going back to Eerie News, and this is one title discovered in Andalusia in 2016. The treasure of TOMARES is unveiled. The treasure is made up of a large stash of 4th century Roman coins discovered under the portico of a villa in the province of Seville, Spain. In April 2016, a civil guard patrol arrived at a construction site at El Saudin Park in Tomares. Heavy machinery came across 19 ceramic vessels filled with what appeared to be coins. They were hidden in a sealed area covered with a few bricks and ceramic filler. The excavator bucket broke some of the jars, however, 9 remain untouched and sealed. 6 years have passed since the discovery, and archaeologists from the University of Seville have released a report about what was found on that spring day. Coin experts examined almost 6,000 pieces and found there was a total of 53,000 coins kept in the 19 amphorae. The hiding area was under an outbuilding of a Roman villa that has yet to be discovered. The estimated amount of coins was arrived at after examination of the contents, and it was found that there was 2,800 coins in each vessel. The coins were produced between the years 294 and 311 AD, during the reign of the emperors Diocletian, Maximian, Constantius, Galerius, Constantine, Severus, Maximus, Licinius, and Maxentius. None of the coins go beyond the year 312. They came from the mints of Rome, Carthage, Aquileia, Treveris, Ticinium, Lugdunum, Londinium, Siccia, and Ostia. A small number of coins came from Alexandria, Zyskius, Thessaloniki, Heraclea, Nicomedia, and Antioch. The majority have Emperor Diocletian on them and were produced in Carthage. This could be due to the fact that Diocletian's coins had more silver in it. The reason for the hoarding of the coins is theorized to be due to political uncertainty and social clashes at the time. For important financial transactions, a huge number of money was necessary. Inflation was eating Rome's wealth, which was addressed by producing more money of poor quality. The location of the villa is on a plateau in an alijarque that overlooks the Guadalquivir countryside. This place has been inhabited since the Paleolithic or Copper Age. Through hundreds of years, different cultures have left their mark, as seen in single-chamber megalithic tombs, a Phoenician sanctuary known as El Camabolo, and the Roman city of Hispalis. A survey carried out on the ground of where the coins were discovered found the remains of a building dating to between the 3rd and 4th centuries. The walls and buttresses were excavated and had elements of horreos or granaries. The building had a portico supported by columns and paved with lime. The construction dates to the 1st century, and it was used until the 4th century, which is when the coins were stashed under the warehouse entrance. 200 years later, the materials from the horreo were repurposed. However, the treasure remained hidden. It's believed the granary belonged to a villa that must be in the area, but they have not unearthed it yet. Roman villas usually included buildings to store food, animals, and living quarters for workers. One has to wonder what happened to the person who hid this treasure. Did he forget, or most probably die unexpectedly before he disclosed his secret? So there you go. Then we're going to go on to this is an update on another story that we covered a few months ago. This is about a foot that was found floating in one of those pools in Yellowstone, and they had not been able to identify. And now they have. This is out of Unexplained Mysteries, and it's titled, Investigators Identify the Owner of a Foot Found in Yellowstone Hot Pool. The unattached appendage had been found floating in the scalding hot water by park staff earlier this year. No, this isn't the plot of a new horror-themed Cinderella reboot, even though it might sound like one. Investigators have spent months on the grim task of trying to track down the individual whose foot was found floating in the Abyss Pool and Yellowstone's West Thumb Geyser Basin back in August. Now at last the mystery has been solved, at least in part, by the revelation that the foot actually belonged to a 70-year-old Il Hun Ro from Los Angeles. Exactly how he had managed to end up in the pool, which can reach temperatures of 60 degrees Celsius, remains unclear, but authorities have since tracked down and informed his relatives. Whatever happened to Roe must have occurred sometime on July 31st, but there were no witnesses, meaning that we may never know for sure what type of mishap ultimately led to his demise. The incident is similar to what happened to 23-year-old Colin Nathaniel Scott, who fell into one of the park's hot springs and was killed almost instantly back in 2016. Suffice to say, if you're visiting the park, it's best to avoid venturing too close to the edge. Yeah, they're beautiful, but it's very, very hot. People don't realize that. This is um this is a really interesting story, and it's still unexplained mysteries, but it's all over the internet, and it's titled "Mystery's Entire Flock of Sheep Walk in Circles for 12 Days Straight." According to the owners of the sheep, Miss Mao, only a small handful of the animals had exhibited this unusual behavior to begin with, but it wasn't long until the rest of the flock had decided to join in. While the farm animals' constant circular pacing seemed nothing particularly unusual initially, Meow was left scratching her head when they continued to do it nonstop for 12 days straight. Even stranger was the fact that on a farm with 24 sheep pens, the sheep in this particular pen, number 13, were the only ones affected. As it happens, however, the explanation for this phenomenon is likely to be rather mundane. Listeriosis, a disease typically associated with spoiled sheep food, is known to cause inflammation on one side of the brain, resulting in disorientation and a tendency to walk around in circles. In all likelihood, this is what was affecting the sheep in this particular case. I was thinking when they said that thing about um, all of them from one pen only, I was like, oh, this sounds like something that they catch. And here's the video on it of the sheep just going round and round in circles for 12 days. And I'm thinking to myself, did they eat? I mean, what was happening? Unless during that time also the inflammation went down in their brains. Very unusual. Very unusual. Well, I think that will be it for today. I will be back with you guys soon to go over some more unusual news. But until then, take care.